Tong Yabghu Khagan was Khagan of the Western Turkic Khaganate from 618 to 628 AD. His name is usually translated as Tong Yabghu in Old Turkic. Another interpretation of his name is sufficiency or completeness. He was the brother of Shegai, the previous Khagan of the Western Gok Turks, and was a member of the Ashina clan. Tong Yabghu's reign is generally regarded as the zenith of the Western Gok Khaganate reign. Tong Yabghu maintained close relations with the Tang dynasty of China, and may have married into the imperial family. The Chinese Buddhist pilgrim Xuanzang visited the Western Gok capital Suyab in modern Kyrgyzstan and left a description of the Khagan. Scholars believe the Khagan described by Xuanzang was Tong Yabghu. Gao and Lavaisier argue that the Khagan Xuanzang met was his son Si Yabghu, rather than Tong Yabghu. Xuanzang described the Khagan as follows. The Khan wore a green satin robe. His hair, which was 10 feet long, was free. A band of white silk wound round his forehead and hung down behind. The ministers of the presence, numbering 200 in number, all wearing embroidered robes, stood on his right and left. The rest of his military retinue was clothed in fur, serge in fine wool, the spears and standards and bows in order, and the riders of camels and horses stretched far out of sight. According to the Old Book of Tang, Tong Yabghu's reign was once considered as the golden age of Western Gok Khaganate. Tong Yabghu Khagan is a man of bravery and astuteness. He is good at art of war. Thus he controlled Tila tribes to the north, confronted Persia to the west, connected with Kazmira to the south. All countries are subjected to him. He controlled 10,000s of men with arrow and bow, establishing his power over the western region. He occupied the land of Wusun and moved his tent to Qianquan north of Tashkent. All of the princes of Western region assumed the Turk office Agilifa. Tong Yabghu Khagan also sent a Tutun to monitor them for imposition. The power of Western Turks had never reached such a state before. Alleged campaigns against Persia. Tong Yabghu's empire fought with the Sassanids of Iran. In the early 620s, the Khagan's nephew Borishad led a series of raids across the Caucasus Mountains into Persian territory. Many scholars have identified Tong Yabghu as the Zebul mentioned in Byzantine sources as having campaigned with the Emperor Heraclius in the Caucasus against the Sassanid Persian Empire in 627 to 628. It has long been maintained by some scholars, including Chavanis, Ukida, Gao and Zudongzeng, that Tong Yabghu cannot be positively identified with Zebul and may actually have died as early as 626. These scholars point to discrepancies in the dates between Byzantine and Chinese sources and argue that definitively conflating Zebul with Tong Yabghu is an exaggeration of the extant evidence. The latest research on this topic proves that they were right. If Tong indeed died in 628, Zebul is to be identified with Sipi Khagan, Tong Yabghu's uncle, who murdered him and rose briefly to the throne. Sipi was by then pronounced Zebul, and he was a small Khagan in charge of the western part of Tong Yabghu's empire, exactly as Zebul was according to the Byzantine sources. Zebul is described as the brother of Tong in the Byzantine sources, and as his uncle in the Chinese sources, a discrepancy which long precluded the identification. However, uncle and elder brother is the same word in ancient Turkish, achi, and the Chinese sources could not render this double meaning with their very precise system of kinship names. Governance. Tong Yabghu appointed governors or tudunts to manage the various tribes and people under his overlordship. In all likelihood, Tong Yabghu's nephew Borishad, and son of Zebul, was the commander of the Khazars, the westernmost of the tribes owing allegiance to the Western Gok Turks. This branch of the family may have provided the Khazars with their first Khagans in the mid-7th century. Death. In California, 630, he was murdered by Zebul, his uncle and a partisan of Dula clan. Following the death of Tong Yabghu, the might of the Western Gok Turks largely collapsed. Although the Khaganate lingered for a few decades before falling to the Chinese Empire, many of the client tribes became independent and a number of successor states, including the Khazar Khaganate and Great Bulgaria, became independent.